Hi, everybody. I guess I'll move my little picture up. Bear with me. I am in to I've made tons of videos because I'm filming for sort of the whole week for two classes. Well, for at least the first 3 days. So that's why you're seeing me in my same pajama t-shirt that I wore in the last 3 videos. But basically, I wanted to continue on this idea of malthus. Think about mal. Mal is bad in any Latin language, right? Mal in French means bad. Mal in Spanish means bad. And so basically, I left you off with this picture. And he predicted that population is growing exponentially. He saw this happen in the UK when the UK was industrializing with coal as an energy source for all of these factories, people moving into the cities and giant factories, large urbanization, a lot of migration into the US. So remember that. Just try to remember 250 years ago was the Industrial Revolution. And at that point, life in the city was really, really hard. It was hard to make a living. There were a lot of jobs, but the jobs were all very, very cheap labor. People cramped into very difficult housing conditions in Europe. And so he saw this massive growth of population, specifically in the cities. And he predicted that there's going to be a point of crisis. And that crisis is going to be right here when the food production cannot keep up with the population. So people who are pessimistic in a big way, there's a word for them. It's called Malthusian. That's a great word. So you could be an optimist where everything's all great, or you're a Malthusian, which everything is terrible. We're going to run out of food. We're going to run out of everything. And it hasn't really happened, though. There's a lot that he could never have predicted. But in general, this is what Malthus predicted. And it's important to know what he believed back then, because a lot of it does come true. And it's an important theory, even if it doesn't, right? Most of it didn't, but let's see, go to the next one. So his book was called Essay on the Principle of Population. Population grows geometrically, exponentially, right? 2 times 2 is 4. 4 times 4 is 8. So way higher. 8 times 8, right? You keep getting higher and higher, like really, really fast. As opposed to food, which grows arithmetically, linearly. And the problem is, if you can think of some of the things that he could never have predicted, right? Food actually does grow. It doesn't quite grow exponentially, but with the trade, and there's a lot that did go right. So basically, what he could not have predicted were, this isn't working to go forward, the expansion of food supply. With the industrial revolution, he doesn't quite get to see how mechanized these tractors become, right? Giant combine harvesters that are the size of my classroom going through a field that are able to collect just tons and tons of food with not many farmers, because it's become very advanced and modernized. And globalization, this food just going around the world on giant cargo ships. So the movement of food, the technological advancement of all of the agricultural production. Okay, so that's one reason it really doesn't come true, because of that. And we're able to produce a lot more food, right? This basically mean the same thing. I would argue that the food hasn't grown exponentially, but we do have plenty of food on the planet for everybody who lives here. The problem is it doesn't go to equal places, right? So, and there's a lot of waste. One of the biggest factors is women being educated. He lived in a time when women were not educated. And so the idea of the women who normally are producing all the babies being in school, getting degrees, being out in the workforce, they don't want to have babies like they used to. So that is a huge factor that changes the way food is produced. I mean, that changes the way that babies are produced, not food. Women produce babies. So people are critical of Malthus. They say that he's outdated, way too pessimistic. He doesn't think about all the innovation that could happen. There's no way he could have predicted it. Failure to consider all the technical innovation, right? How advanced the farming gets in some of these countries. And then the idea, this is a Marxist critique, which I'm not even going to get into here, but that man is social and they're going to want to work to solve these problems. So that's another aspect of it. Now, there's an opposite of the Malthusian person is a cornucopian. Cornucopia is this. It's like basically a basket of bounty and harvest. And if you have cornucopias, you'll never run out of food because you have so much. And they will believe that we're so fortunate because the more people that we have, the more solutions we're going to have and the more food that we're going to have. So there will always be enough food. Anyway, just two different lines of thought. You do need to know who Malthus was. So this shows you the reality of rice and wheat and how this is population and the amount of rice and wheat, along with GMOs, by the way, which are genetically modified crops that are able to withstand all kinds of disease. And they lead to a massive production of food, especially for the developed world. The developing world, right? They depend on a lot of that rice and the wheat, and they haven't, they haven't had a lack of it. Birth rates going down, however, this is interesting. Like Japan, that map that you plotted, basically they have all of these things. Economic development, they're very advanced. They have contraception. It's easy to get. It's distributed everywhere. They go to their doctor. They get 4 months of birth control. Women are in the workforce and they are well educated. The more education a woman has, the fewer babies they will have. And if they're in the workforce, they have other desires besides just having a lot of babies. So that's one reason why countries go down. This is actually an expose on Malthus. This is a little out of order. I should have put it there. I'm not going to go over that now. Now, places that were in danger of overpopulation. Remember what overpopulation means. You've got too many people now and not enough resources. China and India are too, and they become very anti-natalist. Think about what natal means, native, born to, right? So they do not want babies. So they're anti-natalist. They're like, no, we got to do everything we can to discourage people from having babies. And notice higher rates in northern India. India is a huge country. So they have higher rates. Notice up in Kashmir and Jammu, this is right in Pakistan, border of Pakistan. And Afghanistan gets even higher, but they have very, very high birth rates. So they basically will do everything they can to discourage babies, which means, free sterilization, sometimes forced sterilization, to bring down rates. And in southern India, it tends to be much more developed, by the way. Southern India and a lot of the tech companies are in Hyderabad. Hyderabad is a very wealthy area, very educated, super techy, lots of advanced tech schools, computer schools. In fact, a lot of our companies outsource to India. They're a huge democracy. They're actually the largest English-speaking democracy in the world. They were colonized by the British, so they have fluent English. They have a different accent than we do, but their grammar is perfect. And they've actually been speaking English longer than we have as a country in most areas of India. So anyway, that's just a side thing. But in India, anti-natalist, remember, this is like basically the government saying we got to do something to stop people from having babies. So what do they do in India? They basically start a family planning program in the 50s, which means, okay, we're going to start giving birth control out, whether it's contraception in the form of pills or condoms. National Population Planning Program, where you actually have nurses going around to the villages explaining why it's a problem and why women should not be having so many babies. Forced sterilization, this was a pretty horrible time where basically they would force sterilize people who they felt should not be having babies. 22.5 million men were sterilized. And if women went in for 2 babies, they would automatically sterilize them, even if they did not want to be. So a lot of human rights violations there. And then guns for sterilization, it became a little bit more voluntary, right? They will give you free sterilization if you give your gun. They didn't have, they had an area. It's not like guns here in the US. They don't, it's not like most people have guns, but they do use them for hunting. And there was an area in Uttar Pradesh that had some violence. So there were people who had, there was an outbreak of some tension. So in order to kind of like make peace with that conflict, they would substitute, men didn't always want to have babies, but they couldn't afford it because you did have to pay in some of these areas in 2004. So they would basically exchange the guns for that. And then now today it's just advertisement, publicity, persuasion to lower them in most birth states. Most of you know about, I don't know why I'm going through this again, China. Antinatalist again, right? They start in 1979, one child, although it really isn't that. That's a very big generalization. This was really just in the rural areas, poor areas. So again, human rights violations always come up against this, right? What is your freedom versus what is for the what they would call the good of society. So high rates of free contraception and sterilization. Again, China had high abortion rates. Infanticide was a problem in some of these areas where women are being forced to pay these huge fines for having 2 kids. And so in order not to be fined and then jailed, they would kill the baby. Public service campaigns like this, right? Advertisements, public service, propaganda, you can call it, led to overcrowding orphanages. But it does work. You can see the birth rates here going way down. So it's extreme, but it works in China. So again, countries in different stages of the demographic transition model. This is the chart that you are going to look at with your groups. And this is a little bit out of order. Oh, here, this is interesting. This always gets everybody like, wait, what's that all about? Some countries have the opposite problem. They are pro-natalist. They want you to reproduce because they have declining birth rates, which means in 10 years, if you don't have a whole lot of babies, 20 years from now, you don't have people in the workforce. So who's going to take care of all the older people? So negative countries that are in the negative stage 5, like Denmark, which is this video, and Japan, and I will show this video later, not now, because I'm not going to spend time on this, but I promise you'll get to watch it, don't worry. They actually will encourage, if they're not going to start being very immigration friendly so that they'll have people in that workforce, then they have to produce more babies and they have to encourage people to have them by either free daycare, paternity care, which means the father actually gets up to 2 years off, mom and dad, to take care of the babies when they're born, free diapers. Anyway, this is a public service announcement in Denmark, which you will see. I think I'm pretty much done with part 2 of this. This is all in the demographic transition model, which we're going to go through again anyway in a little bit different way. This is looking at birth control, accessibility to birth control. Notice the antinatalist countries, right, are dark brown. They do have access, no data even here. It's below. They don't even, it's not that there is no data. They do have data, but sub-Saharan Africa, always always specify what part of Africa you're talking about. You cannot say anything about all of Africa. It's a massive, massive continent, and it's very, very diverse. And yes, the sub-Saharan countries are very poor, but notice Southern Africa and North Africa, they're doing a lot better. So anyway, there are diseases that go along with this demographic transition model. Stage 1, Black Death, war, pandemics. I think we'll pause. Actually, I guess I'll go through all the way. We don't need to really watch all this, but I may as well finish the video with the slideshow. Stage 2 is where you have typhoid infections. This is when we were in the Industrial Revolution back 250 years ago. Contaminated water wells led to outbreaks of things like cholera. This was a famous map that was made by Dr. Snow to plot who was dying. And he found that they were all happening around a water well. So they just basically forbid anybody to go to that water source, and people stopped dying. So they also a big time in germ theory. So typhoid is another one, infectious epidemics. Then you have in stage 3, so the stage 1 again was like the plague and massive, actually most of it was war and famine that people were, the reason why these death rates are so high and the population's not growing. This is the infectious diseases with cholera and typhoid when the septics would cross the drinking water. And then stage 3 now is when we are getting into basically more degenerative diseases, and people are dying for different reasons, which have to do with heart disease because they're not moving as much. Everything's remote control. We're in our cars all the time. Diets change, red meat, sugar, salt, fats, things that we didn't used to eat. Cancers, new toxins, agrochemicals, pesticides, all of that is very new stuff that affects our health, right? So our what we see are just degenerative diseases, mostly cancer and heart disease. And medical advances are prolonging our life though, right? But if we are dying, it's generally because of these reasons up here. Stage 5, there's a hypothetical stage 5. And yes, I have the little COVID virus here because they're saying what could happen, right? Evolutionarily, the smaller the organism, the faster it can change. So things like bacteria and viruses, right? They build up a resistancy to all of the drugs that we put in, antibiotics, and those can become super bugs that basically become very dangerous because now they build up a resistancy and we can't fight that anymore. And not to mention poverty around the world that is still struggling with things like tuberculosis, countries that are have high rates of that. And improved travel. That makes things like this very dangerous, right? And look to COVID, right? The way that it spread so fast with just a few plane trips right away when things were starting to go bad and people didn't really know it. So spreading that disease all over really fast. That's stage 5, which until last year was hypothetical. And we just used to talk about, oh, well, this could happen. But now we've seen that this is happening. AIDS was the most lethal before that. And again, just looking at, why this can skew the dependency ratio. AIDS hits people in their working years. So this was devastating to South Africa because they should be moving into stage 4 because they're very developed, but they are losing so many people, have been, to diseases like AIDS. And I think we're almost done. Impact on children was horrible. Case in China was something that also skewed the demographic transition model. This is China looking at how in the year 2000 versus today's pyramid. Look at how all these young people have moved up, right? And so now it's a very solid, this is a stage 4 pyramid. China has done incredibly well economically, even though it's come at a big cost, many would argue, for human rights, and authoritarianism is another big critique of China, right? One party rule. So anyway, that's it.